Hey folks, well, I'm sure it's abundantly clear that I'm a cat person. I figured I ought to give the other side some representation. That's right, today's doggo themed, as I received a review key from my friends over at the Indie Gaming Collective. Mostly so I could check out the Stonebot studio and Ludos Games dog-populated tower defense / brawler mashup. What a mouthful. The Last Friend. Join me while I lay down the smackdown during the post-apocalypse in my quest to discover if The Last Friend was a rough ride from start to finish, or left me grateful I'd collared a copy of this title. I'm your host Arlyeon, let's find out together. It's dog-eat-dog in the post-apocalyptic world of The Last Friend. Alpha and his talking chihuahua companion, T1, only had each other when they first made their way towards Diesel City. However, within moments of approaching, they find themselves in conflict with a pack of dog smugglers, and Alpha's soft spot for mutts leads him to gradually rescuing a pack of pups from their evil conspiracy. A conspiracy that seems to grow in scale and severity with each twist of the road, as their opposition ranges from a conflagration-centric content creator to mongrel-obsessed monks and more besides. Yeah, if you haven't guessed it by now, this isn't exactly a gloomy take on a wasteland world story. Rather, The Last Friend is primarily concerned with providing the player some chuckles, though the actual plot is solid and provides some adequately upped antes between acts. I was just also generally fond of the execution. See, the story unfolds in parts with the main narrative playing out the first time you make your way through each stage, as well as the occasional cutscene after you clear certain stages or move to a new area. While charming in and of itself, what really got me was how they dealt with returning to a previously cleared stage. See, while you can't review old dialogue you've missed, you're instead treated to entirely optional segments which lampshade why you decided to run face first into an area you've already cleared. It's actually pretty charming as far as providing excuses for why things are going wrong this time. Beyond that, there isn't too much to witness, other than some bits of flavor from Old Lady Lupe and some flavor text in ye old Doggopedia, which colorfully describes all of your canine comrades, their turrets, and even your enemies. I suppose it's about time to start hashing out just how The Last Friend plays out. In this case, it's a tower defense game which tasks you with doing your best to ward off waves of warriors from smacking your RV into oblivion. The basics are pretty straightforward here. Try and build an adequately elaborate array of turrets to mow down the meatheads running at you, making the best use of your limited starting resources and what they drop. It helps, too, that there's only 3 lanes you'll need to deal with, so filling them to the brim with the guns is doable. Though, it does start out a bit limited. For one thing, unlocking new turrets hinges on you rescuing dogs, with certain ones providing new options as far as structures go, some of which synergize quite well, and others, nah. What's more, enemies are beefy, enough that your dog soldiers aren't always able to keep up, especially once the game expands to having 5 lanes to keep track of. Which is where the other half of the game loop kicks in, and punches. Look, it's a brawler. That should be apparent by now. It actually plays out fairly well though. While Alpha's movement is limited by the lanes, hopping between them isn't bad, and he's more than capable of clearing out rows of the rank-and-file baddies with ease. He can hurl them too, but honestly, I didn't grapple save when I needed to, since baddies were hard-pressed to advance when they're dining on a fresh-served knuckle sandwich, which also bought time for the turrets to mop things up. That or you can just skip straight to murder, given Alpha's special attacks are powerful. Provided you can get the timing down, you've also got a deadly counterattack at your disposal, and provided you have stamina bars for your supers, you can chain together your specials and then empty uppercuts into the prone body to finish the job. Honestly, I was surprised at how fluidly you could combine these attacks together, like dashing into the frontline enemy of a group only to just toss down a devastating uppercut or stomp. It's great. And made all the better by the passive pooches you come across. Essentially, these dogs are different from the turret ones since they serve as a passive ability modifier to Alpha, providing straight statistical boosts like extra health, movement speed, or more situational abilities like bonus damage when at low health, or after a parry, or making your uppercut stronger the more you combo, and that's without even getting into the straight up modifications of your moveset like fiery tackles, or making them pierce through enemies, or your uppercut causing small glaciers. And all of these stack together. There's just legitimately so many options for you to mix and match here. And that's where the nuance of progressing in The Last Friend really kicks in, as you can only take so many pooches with you, obliging you to mix and match turrets and passives in order to find a playstyle that meshes with you and that can handle the enemies in a given level. There's also a third type of dog I haven't mentioned yet, the super puppers, but you can always and only take one of these with you, so while they are a consideration for your builds, they don't count against the other two. Still, given the wide variety of abilities they do have, like healing everything allied, a giant satellite cannon, they make a considerable difference. My tried and true, honestly, was the Akuma-esque pup that gave me a massive damage multiplier on top of all my physical buffs. What I found especially neat here, however, is that The Last Friend also eschews the tower defense element at times. There's a number of levels which just play out as straight up brawler stages, whether they're rescue missions for dogs or the lone wolf stages. Now, these latter ones serve to better teach you the combat system and permanently buff alpha. And in all of these, the only dogs you can rely upon are the passive perk pups. And that's not the only way that the game plays with the formula either. There's optional quests to do, for instance, which essentially oblige you to tackle a trio of stages with a very specific combination of turrets and passive pups. It's a neat concept, really, and one that made your dealings with Lupe a bit more important, which, speaking of, little old Lupe there isn't just there for flavor text. She also provides you an extremely important service, as she can permanently boost the level of your dogs for the treats you've been collecting during the game, which helps when you're forced to use turrets you're unfamiliar with. Admittedly, I preferred boosting passives since they're always boosted, whereas you need to actually spend scrap to further level up turrets during a stage. The fact that my dog treats were pretty limited early on also helped to compound this choice. I mean, you can get dog bones from earning medals, which are achievements. A large number of the ones you'll be getting are random drops from enemies, which sucks if you happen to knock an enemy off screen, or you kill a boss, they explode into a cascading fountain of treats, but you uppercutted them, so they fall away from you and you get absolutely nothing because the explosion of treats happens right around their now distant corpse. Also, because the levels tend to end immediately and without giving you the chance of snagging them, thank you. In all fairness, I didn't really need more since I wound up strong enough that I rarely died, save when I began challenging the post-game boss rush, who, as a note, the only reward there is dog treats. And I guess the satisfaction of overcoming the sheer challenge of fighting every single one of the main bosses in the game back to back. That said, making optimal decisions does help, given there's another form of meta progression to manage, stage stars. These mostly hinge on you getting through a stage while preventing the RV from taking damage, or clearing combat stages quickly. But they're invaluable given that T1 can then turn them into permanent power-ups for turret types, your RV, starting scrap, and enemy drops. I found it to be a fairly enjoyable challenge to engage with, to the point that I managed to get 3 stars on every stage. Except one, which I got 2 stars on during a quest, and then when I went back to mop it up, I found out it freezes at the end during replays. Barf. Thankfully, it wasn't actually that tedious, given that each of the game's areas are populated by some fairly diverse enemies. While there are certainly semblances, they still look fairly distinct and tend to have unique behaviors to keep you on your toes. And they just look gloriously goofy. Dabbing suicide bombers is a thing. It's a whole thing. Also, the details don't just end with your enemies. There's a lot of fun graphics like the way your turrets change as they upgrade, the shift in pooch portraits as they upgrade, and the stickers. The stickers are strictly aesthetic, but you get a cute little image for any dog you do 10 stages with, which is just, it's a cute, nice reward, honestly. Oh, and before I forget, the game's audio is a solid accompaniment to the experience. I mean, there is a little bit of chaos as far as hit sounds go in the thick of combat, especially once you start to litter the field in turrets, but it's fine. What I'm trying to say, really, is that while I'm normally pretty indifferent towards tower defense games, I was pretty darn charmed by The Last Friend. While it's not the most difficult thing, I was certainly engaged by the combat system and distinct approaches it offered for tackling its stages. And I was also a fan of its story from start to finish. Like, sure, it was cheese, but it was just also a lot of fun cheese. Honestly, the largest issue I had with it was just that the keyboard controls really didn't work for me, to the point that I got stuck on a menu screen until I plugged in a controller. I mean, there was the rare dialogue lockup from clicking too fast, but even then, I could exit to the map on a dime. And that's the thing, really. The worst thing I have to say about The Last Friend over the course of an entire thorough playthrough and the myriad twists and turns it plot took was that I was occasionally inconvenienced, but otherwise just fucking delighted. If this isn't the mark of a hit, I don't know what is. Sure, I'll acknowledge if you're looking for something to kick your teeth in for some serious challenge, this might not be for you. That said, if you're looking for a fun mashup of Brawler and tower defense and just a silly, punny story, well, you ought to bark up The Last Friend's tree. Anywho, thanks for tuning in. If you agree, disagree, or just have something to say to me, feel free to comment. And if you have an interest in supporting my efforts to create new indie reviews, interviews, and gaming content, hit the subscribe button and the bell so you know when there's new release. There's also our Crit Hit Cauldron Discord, links in the description to become part of the community, and a Patreon, also link in the description. Lastly, my Twitch, if you want to see me suffer in real time, is twitch.tv/Arlyeon. That all said, I'll catch you folks on the next episode of Crit Hit. Take care till then, folks.